Hi, I'm Dan with Family White TV, and today I'm taking a closer look at two projectors I mentioned in my most recent edition of Home Theater for Masses, the Projector Edition, and that is the Sony VPL VW285ES and the JVC DLA X790R, or the RS540 depending on which supply chain you buy it from. Now, I received a question from Ray Jackson asking me about my opinions between these two projectors and asking me to elaborate more. And so I figured rather than just spit something out off the top of my head, I'd research this and do a little bit more of an in-depth video for you people. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm looking at these projectors from the standpoint of what I've read from some reviews I've read, and from my experience in learning about projectors and home theater in general as a hobby over many years. Now, I haven't been able to personally view either of these, and maybe one day this channel will be big enough that they'll actually start sending me review samples. I actually haven't even tried to request some yet, but maybe one day. So my opinions are based on just what I've read. Now, you can go ahead and read the reviews that I've looked up in doing the research for this, but if you want the TLDR version, then this video is for you. Now, rather than go through all the nitty-gritty details, I'm just going to focus on what the differences are between these two projectors and why they might be important to you. First and foremost, the Sony is $5,000, whereas the JVC is $6,000. And so while the JVC is $1,000 more expensive, they are within the same ballpark. Now, of course, prices are going to vary depending on who you buy from, but these are the manufacturer's suggested retail prices. Now, the first and most obvious difference between these projectors is that the Sony is a native 4K projector with a panel resolution of 4096 by 2160, whereas the JVC has a native panel resolution of 1920 by 1080. And this panel is shifted diagonally by half a pixel in order to create the illusion of 4K. And so you might say, well, there you go, the Sony's $1,000 cheaper and it's native 4K, so it's the clear winner. Well, not so fast. There are other aspects of image quality beyond pure resolution. But before I go on to those, let me talk a little bit more in depth about what JVC is doing to achieve a faux K image. At the most basic level, and according to JVC's website, the entire image is shifted by half a pixel in order to create a 4K image. But it goes beyond simply just shifting the entire image. Their eShift 5 process also analyzes the entire image and processes every pixel in order to display an optimally enhanced image. And so can the JVC's faux K process match the Sony's 4K native image? And in many cases the answer is yes. According to a Sound and Vision review where the reviewer was able to watch both projectors at the same time, he preferred sometimes the Sony and sometimes the JVC. And the reason that he would prefer the JVC from time to time is because of the JVC's superior contrast performance. JVC projectors are known for their remarkably high contrast. Sound and Vision measured the on-off contrast of both the Sony and JVC projectors, and the Sony measured in at 5025 to 1. The JVC, however, was measured in at 22,800 to 1. You see, JVC's contrast is their claim to fame. Their absolute black level is lower than the Sony, and that means the JVC is able to handle shadow detail a little bit better. You see, a projector's ability to display black level is important. While you want a projector that can display a nice bright image, there are times when you don't want a bright image. And according to Sound and Vision's magazine's Shootout, there were times when the JVC was able to render some of the black level detail that the Sony was not able to. To be clear, this is not to say that the Sony is bad at displaying blacks. It's remarkably good in its price point, but the JVC is better. Now, aside from contrast, there are other features the JVC has that the Sony lacks. Both projectors have powered zoom, lens shift, and focus, but the JVC has lens memory. This is important if you have a 2.35 to 1 theater screen. If you have this kind of screen called a constant image height screen, whenever you watch material with a different aspect ratio, you have to zoom the image in and out in order to get it to fit the screen vertically. Now, you can do this manually with the Sony's powered zoom, lens shift, and focus, but you have to go through that whole process every time. With the JVC, you just have to adjust it once and save it as a lens memory, and every time you switch aspect ratios, you just press a button on the remote and the JVC does the rest of it for you. And so that's just a little bit more convenient than having to go through the entire process every time you want to change aspect ratios. Another thing the JVC has that the Sony doesn't have is a dynamic iris. Now, whether or not this is important to you, whether or not you want to use a dynamic iris is up to you, but what a dynamic iris does is when a scene calls for a lot of light, the iris will open up to let more light out from the projector. And conversely, when a scene is a darker scene and calls for less light, the iris will close down to give you a better absolute black level, and you'll get more shadow detail. Now, one other difference I learned about when researching this video was that the JVC has an auto calibration function, whereas the Sony does not. However, to do the auto calibration, you do need to have a color meter. And not just any color meter, but a Spider 5 Pro or Elite, or if you want a better calibration with more consistent results, an X-Rite i1 Pro 2. Now, that's not to say that these projectors don't look good out of the box, because they do. But if you want the absolute best image you can get, then you'll want to calibrate the projector. Now, you can hire somebody to do this, but the thing with lamp-based projectors is that over time the lamp's going to dim and you'll need to redo your calibration. And so you'll save money in the long run if you buy your own color meter and do your own calibrations if you do want the best picture quality over time. And so if you're a DIY enthusiast and willing to learn how to do this and invest the time in it, then you can invest in one of these color meters and calibrate your projector. And as a side benefit, these color meters can also be used to calibrate direct view televisions, your computer display, and even printers. Now, as for me, I've never calibrated my projectors just beyond a basic calibration where you just have a test pattern disc and you just adjust your brightness and contrast, but it is something I'm interested in doing and definitely something I will do when I do get a projector later on down the road once I can afford one of these beasts. Now, other than that, both of these projectors are remarkably similar. Both are XXRD, both have a nice backlit remote, both have user adjustable panel alignment, both have about 40 milliseconds of lag in game mode, both have 3D, both have frame interpolation if you're into that sort of thing, and both are really good projectors. And so which one is right for you? Well, it depends. Now, if you're putting your projector into a theater that's a bat cave with dark walls and ceiling, then I would say that the JVC is the top choice. However, if you're putting it into a theater room that has white walls and ceiling, then the difference diminishes. The JVC is still going to do a little bit better in terms of contrast, but it might not do $1,000 better. If you plan to mainly use your projector in a situation with ambient light, then the superior contrast performance of the JVC goes away completely and the Sony would be the better choice. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on these two projectors. So if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below and I'd be happy to answer them for you. If this video was informative, please be sure to give it a like and please watch for more content in the future. And one day I'll have some sort of an intro that's hopefully not too long and annoying like some channels have, and I'll also have an outro so that as I display other content you might be interested in, you don't have to sit there and watch me stand here like an idiot.